Hi guys, folks, friends. Almost there.
Damn it. Oh, you saw it.
We were in need of a cat anyway, so.
Yeah. Looks like it works. Yeah. Oh. Come back screen. Ok. Non. Ça, on voit tout la même chose. On va rester. Shall we start? Yeah, ready? All right. Then, so this is the title of the talk, Technosterone and UXtrogens Field Check. Let's go.
So I'm Marie-Cécile.
And I'm Goulven Champenois.
Are you having a good time so far? Yeah? Okay, we're gonna totally ruin the mood. I'm sorry. Just right before lunch. Here we go.
Yeah. But you know, like your parents used to say, it's for your own good. And, oops, the blue pill just disappeared and my microphone just moved. Well, we'll have to take the red pill. I could, therefore I am, would Descartes have said if he'd lived close to us. For the past few centuries, our Western world civilization claims to be controlled by reason. But, big news, it isn't. Let's take an example. As many of you know, there's a lot of companies trying to hire developers, but there's a shortage. Yet every day thousands of people are turned away from studies, computer studies, or turned down by companies because of their gender, abilities, or the color of their skin. This is not only bad for people as individuals, it really is, but it's also highly irrational, you know, Descartes, and highly inefficient for society as a whole. So, to put it another way, sexism, racism, homophobia, ableism, etc., it's all bugs. And actually that's quite good. You know why? Because we know how to fix bugs. We'll start by looking at the stack trace, of course, and then we'll test some assumptions, and finally the bugs will be fixed.
So let's get started by digging into the stack trace of sexism and racism, shall we? He's my slave, he's passing the slides, by the way. Street names make a very good stack track because just like code, we constantly add new ones and we never really refactor. The chart over there is the city names of the city of Montreal, Quebec. And as you can see, there's a blatant amount of men and only 6% of women. It's not specific to Quebec, actually, because pretty much all cities in the world have the same amount of ratio. Why are there so few women in those names, Goulven?
Well, let's take an example. This is Rosalind Franklin. She's one of the countless women who've contributed something incredibly valuable to humanity, yet remains virtually unknown. She discovered the structure of DNA. She was fired from her lab, and then her work was stolen, and her two colleagues got the Nobel Prize for it. But she was dead, so the Nobel Prize is not for dead people. Too bad. And there are many more like her. In fact, for centuries, women were not allowed to hold intellectual property. It was assigned to a male. And their ideas were immediately attributed to someone else. This is why we have so few women inventors. There were some, there were many, just not on the record.
Yeah, their work was stolen. Anyway, it's not only street names and science, because in politics it's the same thing. Only 5 women make it to be leaders of countries. 5%. If you have a look, 5%, mon Dieu. If you have a look at this picture above, world leaders marching after the Charlie Hebdo attack a few years ago, well, there's a pretty appalling number of women. How many can you count? Well, let's make it easier, and we'll Photoshop the guys away. It's the norm, yeah, but it's not normal. Well.
But it's not only street names, science and politics. What the diagram above shows is that there are more CEOs named David than women CEOs in the first 1,500 companies listed in the Standard & Poor's Index.
Please.
And let's not talk about John. John, no. Even worse, according to the World Economic Forum, only 2 out of 39 global hedge funds are run by women. There is no rational scientific explanation for having 4 times more hedge funds fund managers named John than women, whatever the name. Simply no explanation.
The problem with this all-male cast of politicians, bankers, CEOs, and so on, is that those people have a worldview that is basically obliterating half of the population. For instance, some journalists recently found that my dear friend Elon Musk didn't follow any women on Twitter. Yes, seriously. The problem is that a lot of other men have a very tiny ratio of women followings. So what is the worldview that they got?
Yeah. This phenomenon is called the glass ceiling, when there are gender or racial differences unexplained and unexplainable by other job-relevant characteristics of the employee. You may also hear about the bamboo ceiling when talking about Asian Americans, or that some people are glued to the floor, to a sticky floor, when they never get promoted despite comparable or better performance. Okay, these names are funny, and there's a lot of names like these. The cliff, there's, well, you look it up, there's a lot of names. This is funny, but the reality behind this is incredibly frustrating.
Another ceiling, the celluloid ceiling, because women account for less than 20% of movie producers, directors, writers, cinematographers, and so on. 20% only. I didn't see those facts at first. I thought that having men everywhere was just the norm, and I was used to it. But then I discovered the Bechdel test. It says if a movie is pretty bad or not, basically. So to pass the test, a movie has to have at least 2 female characters with names, not just green plants, you know. They need to have a conversation, the 2 of them, and to talk about something else than a man. And I was very, very saddened to see that even my favorite movies, some didn't pass the test. Yeah.
Star Wars.
Voila.
You all love them.
So quality aside, right? No judgment on any of the episodes or the order you shall have to watch them or anything. Half of them don't pass the test. Even though the movies are, the recent ones are a bit more diverse, the thing is Disney chose to not sell the figurine of Rey, one of the major characters. What were they afraid of? Seriously, just a female character. What does it say to little girls?
In 2015, the internet was ablaze with the Oscars So White hashtag, because all 20 nominees for the Oscars were white. This was shocking, but it's easily explained. The jury is almost exclusively white as well. So another factor is that white actors get cast even if their skin color doesn't fit the role. Scarlett Johansson, for instance, she's not Japanese in any way. Yet she was chosen to play the lead role in Ghost in the Shell, the movie. I mean, okay, why? Jake Gyllenhaal's ancestry includes Swedish, English, and Swiss German. Why choose him to play a Persian prince? Or, ouch, this one hurts, Willem Dafoe in The Last Temptation of Christ. He's whitewashing Jesus himself. You know, whitewashing is when a white actor plays a role for a different skin color. I wonder if Willem Dafoe will get access to paradise after that.
Who will?
Yeah.
So yeah. Oh.
Yeah. Okay, so we've reached the end of Stack Trace. We've gone 2,000 years back, and we're still looking at sexism, racism, homophobia. So this is nothing new, because the source of the problem lies in our heads.
Our brains are fantastic. The only fact that we can be here and have built so many things, including the internet, is great. But the problem is that studies have identified that our brains work with more than 170 cognitive biases. which are decision-making processes that short-circuit the rational part of our minds, basically. Some of these biases are very useful. We can sort out information where there's too much, we can understand what's happening, or take a quick decision in case of stress or dangerous situation. But the problem is that all of them tend to mess with the rational parts very deeply because we don't notice them. This is just going automatically. Our brains are working. And we just tend to stick rational things on top of our irrational decisions just because of them.
Yeah, we don't like being unable to explain why we did something, so we make something up. This is studied and...
This is human.
Yeah. Okay, so our brains are buggy, and society as well. Are we screwed? Well, in a way, yes, because it means that you will certainly hurt people sometimes, even if you don't want to. But humans love adapting to their surroundings. I mean, from the equator to the North Pole. And they also love to change their circumstances. So there is hope.
Okay, let's switch to the blue pill now. Okay, just like we try our best to do, Goulven and me, we invite you to question everything. For instance, the idea that women are, or men, sorry, are naturally better at math or STEMs is just a bias, a big, big, big bias. If you look closer into computer programming history, women were pioneers, developers, engineers, and operators. We used to give them all the work because they were reliable and thorough. Yes, there was even a unit. People used to use kilo girl as a unit to specify the amount of work that could be done by a woman in a certain time.
Yeah, and now you know when you hear something, you go and look for the facts. And what you see is that the numbers actually tell the opposite story of the math for men. It's a myth. In countries which give girls the same access to education, girls outperform boys in all fields by tremendous margin. And a study based on GitHub data found that female contributors had a much higher pull request acceptance rate than men. So much for the fallacy that men are naturally better at STEM. You may also look at naming conventions and realize that they ought to change. The Django team, for instance, chose to get rid of the slave and master names for databases because they acknowledged that it conjures bad memories for a lot of people. And apart from the few white, of course, people saying, oh, why change that? Surely people can understand. It's only historical. We don't mean anything derogatory. But then, under that, there are hundreds and hundreds of messages saying, as a person of color, this means a lot to me.
Yep. Look at Nintendo's iconic game console. Did you ever question that? What would have happened if they chose to name it like Game Player or Game Device? No, they chose Game Boy. Game Boy, seriously. Maybe it would have had an influence on the current harassment problem that women have to go through just because they are women in-game? I don't know.
Or you might, as a designer, realize that slugs emojis were not really representative of people's complexions, and you add emojis with different skin colors. Simple change. Well, you can't imagine the number of positive reactions and the dozens of people thanking this designer for making that happen.
It's all about representation. Underrepresented people just say nothing until something happens and they are eventually visible. It's like the Black Panther or Wonder Woman. For the first time in decades, people of color could identify with superheroes and characters that were neither whitewashed, or stripped off of their culture or an important part of it. To you, it might be just another questionably crappy Marvel movie. For other people, it means way more than that. And personally, I went to see Wonder Woman and I was giggling on my cinema seat, seeing Diana Pryce kicking some sweet men's butts.
So, if you're serious about fighting your biases, you should start by reading these books. Blink by Malcolm Gladwell It's very easy to read. It's like a novel. It's very entertaining. It's all fuzzy on the scientific side sometimes, but well, it's really interesting and it starts to make you question everything. There's Predictably Irrational by Dan Ariely, which is also a great book. Very personal for him because it started with the studies of his pain. He was burned heavily on the entire body, and that was really hard. And he had to remove.
Like every day, nurses had to remove bandages, and he, well, had the occasion to study. Is it more efficient to strip it off in one go or to go slowly? Do you know?
Every day for years.
Yeah. Should we give an answer?
Sorry?
You will see. Read the book.
Yeah. Also, there's Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, who received the Nobel Prize in Economy for the ideas that he exposes in the book. So it's a bit harder to read, but it's just as interesting for exposing the fallacy that we are rational people. And as you do go and explore, you will realize that you've always lived in Wonderbro land. It's a magical country full of beer and pizza and in-jokes and all-nighters.
Who cares?
And even a few unicorns in a corner. It's a country which claims to be a meritocracy, but it isn't. It's a country where you can be yourself as long as you fit the cliché, just like everyone else. One could even say, in the light of the recent event and acquisition by GitHub, of GitHub by Microsoft, that it's an open source country with very narrow gates.
Maybe you're thinking, this is not a big deal, you know, Broland is not hurting anyone. Well, no, sometimes it isn't. Indeed, like you end up with a gorgeous, giant period pad when you just wanted a nice pool bed, right? It just needed one human being who actually already had used a pad in her life or his life. Most likely that the product designers here in this team never had to use one, which is the kind of problems that homogeneous teams encounter.
Yeah. Or you may have bigger problems, like a studio who promoted their dancing games on Times Square one busy evening. The night before, they realized that the sensors didn't see black people. Ouch. They worked on it all night, but they couldn't get fixed on time. And what was supposed to be epic fun went to become epic shame. Ouch. At least they learned a lesson.
Because whether we want it or not, code is law. The way we design and code the products, forms, apps, define what is possible and not, and who is included or not. There are no chief ethics officer to verify the code and make sure that it meets the guidelines. And, well, from a very user perspective, you can't see the code. It's opaque. You don't see what it's doing and how it's making choices on your behalf. In case of issue, can you sue an algorithm? Not yet. And I don't know if we will be able to one day.
And this is going to be worse with IAs. So,
letting the
future.
black box decide based on a biased set of data.
Yeah.
What a fantastic future.
So the best way to make sure that code and designs are free of bias bugs is to look for objective figures and test with real users. This will help ensure objectivity and also will train your empathy. Actually, one thing you can do to get your empathy levels just right is be careful, mindful of yourself, get enough sleep, get away from stressful situations, because when you are stressed, your empathy is damaged very quickly. And we've discovered that. But you look at the burnout talk if you want to. Also, you can read about sociology and social dynamics, because this will help you understand your own motivations and those of your users. You'll gain a sort of X-ray vision. So, wow, superpowers. This is cool. This is really interesting. In life, in every day, you can look at a menu and think, okay, why did you choose to highlight this part of the menu? And you can really question everything.
And also, relationships with your friends will be better.
Yeah. But first and foremost, you have to go and meet people and listen to their stories. Even if it means going out of your comfort zone at first, well, it's your duty. After all, if you never meet with the product owner, your process is not really agile, is it?
You may be surprised to find out that being intersex is as common as having red hair or green eyes. What you find in the real world, outside of Broland, is very different from what we generally assume. Once and for all, people are not edge cases. There is none of that. By the way, no women, Asian people, young parents, elderly, disabled are not edge cases. We should actually stop using the term altogether and practice inclusivity by design instead. Everybody is welcome, access to everyone.
Tim Berners-Lee.
Actually, just test with the right set of people. Just do that. Don't rely on your team only. Don't hire test people just because they look like you, or you don't want to design a racist soap dispenser. Don't do that.
Yeah. And when you design forms, remember that binary is for bits only. Some people identify neither as men nor women. So question yourself, do you really need to know their gender? Or can you add a third option, maybe prefers not to answer? Or maybe just entirely stop asking for gender because it's not really meaningful and it's rarely used appropriately anyway. I mean, one thing I usually say is that I know a lot of people, couples, men and women, who use the same account. So what
same
gender?
email address.
Yeah. Also, some people don't want to see last year's memory on Facebook. You know, the thing you tell it to not show you anyway, and it keeps repeating. Because what happens is that some people have bad traumatizing events. And Facebook's like, well, look at this. You had a trauma last year. Do you want to look at it now? No? Okay, I'll show it to you next year. Yeah, this is a nice feature if you only live happily with unicorns in Broland, but it can hurt people.
Some people have no first names. Other example, or their first name is like 2 characters. That does exist a lot. And who are you to tell them that? Who are we to tell them that their first name is invalid? Some people have names that can seem very weird to regular expression or look like a joke. For instance, it happens a lot on Facebook for people from native communities. What do we really want to tell them that their name doesn't fit the model, the norm? It's horrible.
But there's more to life than code and beers, and if you look at what job descriptions say about your company, Amazon, for instance, wants to hire maniacs. This is what they say.
Maniacal.
Yeah.
Maniacal. Seriously, in a job interview, job offer.
Are you crazy enough? Yeah, okay, you can come in. Twitter's looking for nerds. Well, fair enough. And Uber, Uber values people without the least trace of basic human decency. Wow, that hurts. The thing is, if you compare these job descriptions with the sort of problems that the companies face, you will see some correlation. So, as the saying goes, be careful what you wish for. And if you don't want to hire toxic people, make sure it shows in your recruiting material.
And yeah, words matter. In the workplace, they do matter, and we have to find an expression to replace guys, for instance. I said it myself. We can say fellas, folk, friends, people, peeps, whatever, pals, everything works and makes everyone feel included.
Yeah.
It may seem a bit pointless to you, but I swear for women or people of color, LGBTQ people, it does matter. We have to basically change our behavior to fit into a culture. Women in management positions have to be bossy, else they are not listened to and they are deemed weak. But if they're too bossy, then they are too bossy. What should we do then? What is the appropriate level of bossy? We will never know. We need to be aware of the fact that we treat different people differently in the way we conduct our hiring interviews or when we evaluate people in a company.
And trans men and women can help us see what is invisible to most of us. I once read the story of a freelance filmmaker who, after transitioning and being identified as woman, saw her client's behavior suddenly change. Even though she had the same skills and references as before, people were not telling her, oh, the lighting wasn't right, or that she should place the camera differently. Well, studies have confirmed that we don't evaluate men and women by the same criteria. While men are judged on skills, you all got skills, that's good. But women also need to have experience and the right attitude, which the interviewer decides upon on a whim. This causes unequal and unfair treatment. Here's a screen capture of a blog post. Trisha G is a Java developer and speaker, and she was tired of always explaining how to have a more diverse speaker lineup to conference organizers. Because it's not okay to ask women to do all the work to foster diversity, she wrapped all her ideas in this post, and it's a gold mine. And a lot of it works even if you're recruiting too, so that's why I stuck a company sticker on it. So go read it, and you'll find a lot of good ideas there.
The first advice that Trisha gives us is to put out a code of conduct and to enforce it if needs be. And Takeoff Conf has one, it's great. Even for a project, it's important to explain how you will work and what are the values that you want to nurture through your work. So Corinne Ada, she's here, and she worked on this for GitHub, and it's a one-click operation to add a code of conduct to your project.
Because you need to make rules explicit. You need to commit to your COC and use it when it's time for conflict resolution. Because as long as things are not clearly said, people won't know or be able to hold anyone accountable. So you need to describe what is not allowed and why you won't tolerate intolerance. Then enforce your code of conduct. So if someone is being a jerk, is harassing or misbehaving with other co-workers, contributors, or attendees, step up and use the rules that you set to fix the situation. I know, nobody likes doing that, but safety for everyone is more important.
One more thing, teach yourself about accessibility, of course. There's a ton of tutorials on the web for that, and it makes you a better developer and a better human being, of course. Accessibility is not only physical. Some diseases are invisible, like chronic pain, for instance. Some people have mental issues that disturb their focus. They can't really use your interface. Disabilities can be situational, or temporary or permanent. A heavy accent, for instance, can really be a hassle when you try to interact with Amazon Echo or such devices. Did you really think about that before?
So, we're almost done, and I hope we've cheered you up at the end. But here's a cheerful note if you need it. Slack just published their annual diversity figures, and they quite closely mirror the American population, way more than other companies in tech. They have 44% women, 12.6 non-white people, and 8.7 of people identifying as LGBTQ+. So imagine you're a fast-growing company, and does it seem rational to you to ignore an enormous talent pool just because your biases blind you? I mean, let's be rational.
Okay, so wrapping up what we all have to do to make the world a better place for everyone. First, we need to believe women, LGBTQ people, persons of color, and disabled people when they tell us that they experience bad things. We just have to straight up believe them and not question their experience. Also, we need to educate ourselves on systemic oppressions and how to name people, why pronouns are important, and how everything that is not us works. It's very important.
Yeah. You also need to acknowledge your privilege, and once you got that, well, you use it to help others, because this is like a power that's been granted to you, and with great powers, You also need to learn about your own biases and how to find them. Well, we all. It's a daily struggle, but it's really worth it.
It's also good to leave space for underrepresented people, For instance, if every year you fill out all the call for papers for all conferences, and maybe 1 year out of 2 you can just not do it and promote a woman, for instance, or anyone else from you, that's good. Good thing is to stop laughing, at oppressive jokes or sexist jokes, because seriously, this is not funny. Making fun of people just because they are different or don't have... Why? No one... I don't... So let's call out people and say, this is not funny. Why are you making fun of black people? And that's it.
Yeah, just say, if somebody makes a bad joke, and you just say, oh, I'm sorry, what's the funny part? And people will struggle and try and explain as like, and they will realize that it's not funny. One more thing you can do is follow women, people of color, non-binary people on social networks. That means you don't have to get close to them, you don't have to meet them, you just follow them. It's a one-click operation again, and you will see the world through a different lens, and this is really enriching for you. Once you do that, you can also use pictures of underrepresented people in your presentations and mock-ups. For instance, when we were hiring, I took a giraffe picture to say, well, we don't care. Whoever you are, you're welcome in the company.
I personally use a lot of... I've been doing presentations with pictures of women only. No one said anything. That's great. And, well, in the end, we have to accept the discomfort of building a better world for everyone. Yay!
Okay, we've got tons of links and articles and stuff. So if you want to read more, we'll put the presentation online with clickable links, which is nicer than this. And there are books. Technically Wrong is really great book.
Yeah.
Programmed Inequality, Weapons of Math Distraction, etc. Well, you can see that on when the presentation is online.
So one last thing.
Yeah. Last Steve.
Yeah. There's a tool online called Proportional, which tries to guess how many people you follow on Twitter are men, women, non-binary, or trans, and it returns a percentage. Please go there, log in, test your timeline, and tweet the results to us with the hashtag Technosterone. Et voilà, thank you very much.
Thank you, folks, peeps, friends. So we got quite some time for a couple questions. I think this is really interesting. Like, I would just like to say, I really wanted you to hear that, because that's really what I stand for. And even when I started working on the Diversity for Takeoff conference, I realized with all my great intention, I was biased as well, and I was making mistakes. And it's not something natural. We really need to pay attention, because our worldview is not everyone's worldview, and yeah, that's so important. And I think we all need to make efforts to build the culture we want to see in our industry, if not for the world. And that may sound idealistic for a lot, but when you think about that, you just realize that's a necessity. It's not just an idealistic point of view. So thanks for listening to that.
So any questions? Or we'll be here the 2 days anyway, so if you want to interact with us, we'll be here.
Okay, thank you.